Hello, you're watching the Daily Roundup by People's Dispatch, where we bring you some of the top stories from around the world. Let's take a look at the headlines. US, South Korea begin massive military exercises. Israeli Supreme Court rules against releasing Palestinian detainee. 176 indigenous people murdered in Bolsonaro's third year in office. EU and US raise hope for revived nuclear deal with Iran. The United States and South Korea on Monday, August 22, started conducting major military drills and exercises, including extensive war games, the likes of which haven't been seen in recent years. The Ulchi Freedom Shield drills will reportedly continue until September 1. The joint exercises will feature a large number of aircraft, warships, artillery, as well as thousands of American and South Korean troops. The exercises will rehearse defensive and counterattack scenarios for what reports stated will be a war launched by neighboring North Korea. Even though the US and South Korea have called these large-scale war games purely defensive measures, North Korea has denounced them as preparations for invasion. These exercises, according to reports, can include up to 300,000 soldiers from the two countries and also include rehearsing plans for the assassination of top North Korean leadership, including a decapitation unit. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has recently warned the US and South Korea against any such plans to invade his country and called these military exercises thug-like behavior. At an event commemorating the 69th anniversary of the armistice that put a stop to active fighting between the two sides during the Korean War of 1950 to 1953, he accused South Korea of seeking suicidal confrontation to deepen ties with the US imperialists. The exercises, which are normally held twice every year, are being held after a gap of 4 years due to the global coronavirus outbreak. These joint military drills were preceded by missile defense drills that the US jointly carried out with South Korea and Japan off the coast of the US state of Hawaii. Israel's Supreme Court on Sunday, August 21, rejected an appeal to release Khalil Avavdeh, the Palestinian administrative detainee on hunger strike for the last 172 days, from his illegal administrative detention in Israel. Avavdeh's lawyer, Alham Haddad, had filed an appeal with the top court, citing his client's rapidly declining physical and mental condition and the imminent risk of death that he faces as a result. The appeal to the top court was filed after an Israeli military court had rejected a similar appeal a few days earlier for Avavdeh's release on humanitarian grounds. The appeal was filed after Avavdeh was transferred from prison to hospital owing to a drastic deterioration in his health. The administrative detention order against him has also been suspended by the authorities for the duration of his stay in hospital, meaning that he will have to serve days spent in hospital once again after he's taken back to prison. Reports also noted that while he is in hospital, the authorities have allowed his family and lawyers to visit him, but Avavdeh has been handcuffed and chained to his bed and has guards posted outside his room at all times. He launched his hunger strike in December last year after Israeli security forces arrested him and issued an administrative detention order against him, subsequently renewing it. His family and lawyers have said that Avavdeh hasn't eaten any solid food and is surviving only on water. He has developed a range of severe and adverse health effects and complications while on hunger strike, including cognitive decline, extreme weight loss, memory and speech loss, being confined to a wheelchair, and not being able to walk, among other. Palestinian activists and legal experts have said that the court's ruling amounts to giving Avavdeh a death sentence, slamming the court as a rubber stamp for the Israeli government and security services, and a part of the overall Israeli machinery of occupation and apartheid deliberately established to oppress and persecute Palestinians. Moving on to the third story, attacks on indigenous peoples in Brazil are on the rise, according to a new report. During the third year of Jair Bolsonaro's government alone, 176 indigenous people were murdered in the country. The number is almost equal to that of 2020, when 182 indigenous people were violently killed. Launched on August 17, the report Violence Against Indigenous People in Brazil, an annual publication of the Indigenous Missionary Council or CIMI, registered 355 cases of violence against indigenous people throughout 2021. That is the highest rate since 2013, when the method of counting was altered. In 2020, there were 304 cases, which in addition to deaths include threats, injuries, racism, sexual violence, and attempted murder. From one year to the next, therefore, there was an increase of 51 episodes of this kind. It is a degree of violence that we had not seen in this way, summarizes Lucia Elena Rangel, CIMI's anthropological advisor. Following the same pattern since Bolsonaro assumed the presidency, the states that registered the highest number of murders of indigenous people were Amazonas with 38, Mato Grosso do Sul with 35, and Roraima with 32. The general context of attacks on indigenous territories, leaders, and communities is related to a series of measures on the part of the executive branch that favored the exploitation and private appropriation of indigenous lands, evaluates CIMI's report. For the sixth year in a row, CIMI registered an increase in possessory invasions, illegal exploitation of resources, and damage to property in indigenous lands. In 2020, 263 invasions of the territories of indigenous peoples were registered, while in 2021 there were 305, an increase of 16%. Among the conflicts over land, the report also highlights the recurrence of indigenous lands where there is an overlapping of rural environmental registries or CAR, which are certifications of private properties on top of traditional territories. In some cases, such as in the Uruiuwawa, indigenous lands in Rondonia and Baravela in Bahia, the report reveals that there has been an attempt to sell lots of land through social networks. The report, available on the Council's website, also features articles that, among other topics, addresses the incarceration of indigenous people in the country, the budgetary exclusion of Bolsonaro's indigenous policy, and mechanisms for reparation and non-repetition of violations against this population. And finally, the European Union and the United States, both on Monday, August 22, expressed confidence in Iran's responses to the EU's proposal to revive the 2015 nuclear deal signed by Iran and the world powers. EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell, while speaking at an event in Spain, said that he considers Iran's response to the proposal he sent to Iran as the coordinator of the negotiations reasonable. He further stated that Iran and the other world powers, excluding the United States, will also be holding a meeting this week to further discuss the revival of the deal in the Austrian capital, Vienna. Meanwhile, the US State Department also said that it is encouraged by Iran's response to the EU proposal. The US welcomed the dropping of some of Iran's past demands and said that it is now working quickly to secure a mutual return to compliance with the agreement. One among these demands now dropped is Iran asking for the removal of its Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, from the US list of foreign terrorist organizations, which the US called a non-starter. However, it added that there are still some more outstanding issues left to be resolved before the nuclear deal can be fully revived and go into effect once again. Iran's response was received by the EU after 16 months of talks aimed to revive the deal, officially known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA. The resumed talks were being held between Iran and the P4+1, that is Russia, China, France, Britain, and Germany, with the United States not participating in the talks directly. The talks, which resumed last year in April, broke down in between due to the negotiating parties not being able to reach an agreement on each other's demands before they resumed on August 4 this year. The talks finally concluded on August 8, with the parties agreeing to a modified text of the original agreement. Iran and the US had last month also taken part in indirect talks mediated by the EU in the Qatari capital Doha, yet another attempt to reach an agreement on the various clauses and demands. But those talks had also proven unsuccessful due to the United States making a number of excessive and unfair demands from Iran. However, in a recent positive note, Iran had said that the United States has accepted 2 of its offers orally, and now it is up to the US to be realistic and flexible in order to make more progress and finalize a revived nuclear deal. And that's all we have for today's episode. For more such stories, visit our website peoplesdispatch.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.